What's up, people of the internet? I'm back with another video. Just wanted to preface the video I'm about to show you guys just a little bit. I want to do just a little breakdown of how you can get more depth to your videos, into your images. So we're gonna hop into Final Cut. I got a couple of clips pulled up for you guys where we can kind of break it down and you guys can see some examples instead of me just explaining it on screen. So let's hop over to the computer and we will get things cracking in Final Cut. All right, so we're gonna kind of be doing a depth breakdown and kind of show you a couple different tricks and a couple different things you can look for when you're filming to add some depth to your images and make them a little bit better. So I got 4 around 10 to 12 clips here that we're gonna go over, and we're gonna see some different ways that we can add depth. So clip number 1 here is a video I shot for a client, and it's just, I'll play it for you guys. So the first thing I'm looking for here is leading lines. So this is one of the intro shots, and I kind of wanted to add some leading lines into this image, obviously, when I was looking for things to shoot and add some depth. So the good thing about this image is right here, as you guys can see, there's some foreground, and as you move, that foreground is moving too. So one thing I like to do is find a foreground, right? And this one, there was nothing really to move past, but the more you move with objects closer to the camera, the more it will look like the image is moving more, creating a more dynamic shot, adding some more depth. So you can see some leading lines here where my mouse is going. These handlebars are leading lines. This is a leading line here, and then there is some background and some depth, which is also good. So the whole time your eyes are supposed to be going throughout and looking down these little runner things. I don't know what they're called, runways or something, I don't know. Second clip, this is what I'm talking about when you move in front of something. So you can see this big gray black box on the right side. When I was originally filming it, the two ladies here looked pretty boring if I didn't have something to move past. So this is actually just an exercise band that's hanging from one of the pull-up bars. So that's hanging there, and I just put my camera right up next to it, and I just pan to the left, and you can see it reveals them. So you can kind of see on the right side here, you see all these things dangling here. That's one of the things that I moved past. So you can see it adds some depth to the image, like you're revealing something. In this case I was revealing them doing their warm-up, and it also frames them a little bit. So that's one thing I look for too, is a frame inside a frame. Obviously you can see this big box or rectangle here is the full frame, 1920 by 1080, but you want to look for frames inside of the frame as well. I'll show you that a little bit later in a concert, but this frame here, this line here by the band frames them to the left of the screen, pushing your eye to the left so you actually focus on the subject. So watch it one more time, and boom, just a short little clip like that, but passing that foreground is super important. That's one thing I really look for when shooting, is to find a foreground to move past. So you can see here, this is the same thing. Moving past this bike just adds that little bit of motion and gives you some depth, right? So now you know there's something in the foreground, and you know there's people in the background, which also adds depth to focus on your subject in the middle there doing her kettlebell lunge, one leg lunge thing. I don't know what it's called. But if you didn't have this bike in here and you didn't have people in the background, it would look pretty flat and pretty boring, right? So moving past this bike, this stationary bike seat, and having some people moving in the background really draws your eyes into the subject. One thing I also did here while I was moving the shot, as I was moving to the left, was tried to frame my subject in between Pam here, Pam Karpenko, and I don't know this lady's name, but I tried to frame my main subject here doing the lift in between these two to kind of condense it and push the viewer's eyes to the middle of the frame instead of looking elsewhere, like at the trainer back here or maybe at the window. I tried to frame her in between, move past some foreground, and it really draws you into the subject. Clip number 3. So this is actually an interview, same video. Interviews are a little bit different. Most of them are stationary unless you have a moving slider or a camera operator, but most of the interviews I do are stationary. And one thing I look for when I'm interviewing is leading lines. This is especially important in interviews because the lines tell you where to look. Now, when I was framing up Dr. Kirk here, I really needed something to push the viewer's eyes towards him And the one thing I did when framing this is I saw these not monkey bars, but these pull-up bars in the back, and you can see it draws a line right to his head, right above his eyes. I couldn't get it at his eyes because of the tripod height, but both of these are pointing lines right at his head, and that is exactly what I wanted. So that's the only real thing here when I was looking for interview wise. But usually in interviews, maybe you want a practical light, or you want some type of framing within the image. But with what we had at the gym here, I couldn't really execute on that, and the only thing we got done here was these leading lines. But you can see how good that looks with the lines. Without the lines, it would feel like the frame is too big and the eyes don't really know where to go, so they could be bouncing all over the image, right? Moving on to number 3, this is what I was talking about with framing within a frame. So this is a video that I shot for Killing Smalls, which is a local band in Minot, and they were playing at, this was the last night that the O closed, the old original, the bar, and they had a railing in front of the band, obviously, so people can't go on stage. But one thing I did was I got low, and then I framed the lead singer within these 2 poles. So this is a perfect example of a frame within a frame. So obviously you see the big frame of the full picture again, but it really pulls the subject in, excuse me, it really pulls the audience in when you frame him within here. So right when you watch this clip, you know you're supposed to be looking within that tiny frame of those 2 bars. So that's another thing you should look for when shooting, is to find a frame or frame your subject within something. So this is a different video. Obviously this is a DAC Jam video that I did, and this was the trailer. One thing that just happened naturally that I didn't really plan for was we had this shot walking down the stairs, and look at the leading lines for this image. So you have the bottom of the baseline here, you have the railing here, you have this here, the top of the ceiling, and the top of the ceiling on this side, and then he is framed within the doorway of the bottom of the stairs. So this obviously all just happened naturally because of the nature of how stairs work. And it's perfect because the leading lines on, and there's even leading lines by these posters too here. So the leading lines from the ceiling, the floor, the railing, the posters, and the framing within the door here really pull your eyes into Levy here when he's walking down the stairs. Now you give a little peek up to one of the posters and walk down, but that beginning shot starts with all those leading lines telling you right where to look. So that's kind of what you're looking for with leading lines and framing. Now into this one, this is another foreground and background depth breakdown. I'll play the clip here first for you. You can see we're panning past Stetson as he puts the cassette tape in as people enter the room, right? So one big thing for this clip is the foreground. You move from right to left, passing Stetson doing the action in front of the subjects we're looking for. So this adds depth and makes the image way more dynamic than it would if we just followed Levy and Tyler walking into the room. So just adding that subtle effect of passing by someone actually doing something adds so much depth to the image. It also helps have people in the background, which adds a background for just that added touch of depth. Foreground, like I said, is a huge thing when you are trying to create depth in your images. This is one of my favorite interviews I've ever shot, actually, and that's again because of the leading lines. Now you can see the 2 leading lines here of the logo, right here and right here, are going right to Mr. Carson and framing him up perfectly. Another thing is this back grandstand line here. Both of those are going directly to his eyes. So you can see there, and then there's some leading lines from the infield pulling towards him, and then the center framing, there's nothing we could really do about framing wise because we wanted to put it dead center in center field, but I thought the framing turned out very well with the grandstand perfectly framed behind him. So this one is really big on leading lines, and you can see there's lines everywhere. There's one here, here, grandstand, and then his head is even framed in between these 2 poles here. So in total there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, at least 10 leading lines that are pushing everyone to Carson Tanini and the interview and whatever he might be talking about. So that's one thing that I looked for in this one, was center framing with some leading lines. Made sure that grandstand pointed right at his eyeballs. This is another one that is a frame within a frame. In this image, our talent, Mr. Blackburn, he hung up some pictures of some athletes that he had trained. So he was walking in front of the pictures, looking at all the athletes he's trained and, you know, kind of what he's been through over the past 25 years. And I just went behind the pictures, and in between one of the gaps of the pictures, I just framed his face for a little half second there. So this one is also one of my favorites just because of the framing. Like in this, if I pause it on this image, there's only one thing you can focus on right now, and it's Blackburn. Otherwise, both sides are white, and he's framed perfectly within the center of the frame. So that's probably the best example you'll get of a frame within a frame. Now, same video, obviously, again, here's some leading lines. So you have the lines at the bottom of the pictures going right to Blackburn's eyes, and you have this line going right to him as well. And then he is framed on the right third. So these leading lines here, look, there's my pretty face. So these lines right here are pulling your eyes to the subject. So that's really what you're looking for with leading lines. Just another example. Play it through, that's what it looks like. So I could have just shot the whatever that coffee bag is without the tree there, but look how much movement is portrayed by me just passing this one leaf hanging here. So it looks like the camera's moving super far, right? But I moved the camera probably a total of maybe a foot, right? But it looks like the camera is moving much farther than that just because of that leaf that I was passing. So foreground is huge. I can't stress it enough that foreground is huge when you're trying to get dynamic shots and reveals and add depth to your image. And depth is what we want, guys, right? So make sure you're adding foreground, looking for leading lines, some backgrounds, some framing within a frame. Here's our last one, another frame within a frame. This is for Penlight, electrical and mechanical. And we were filming this guy working on some electrical box here outside, and we could have got nice and in tight on his hands, but I wanted to use this square framing. I wanted to use this square framing here to frame him in, right? So that framing inside the electrical box just cuts out a little bit more of the frame and pulls you into Mr. Handyman here, fixing all these wires and diffusing bombs. So that's for that one. And then this clip obviously is a foreground again. My favorite thing, guys, foreground. I can't stress it enough. Foreground, 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 pass something, put your shoe up, put your hand up. I did that one time. This is documentary. Put my hand up, move the camera past my hand. Look like there's a wall there. So anyways, back to the Penlight thing, passing the foreground on the right side here, moving your eyes to the left, and then obviously framing him within this beam here, or this beam, and this beam just cuts out that screen a little bit more and makes you focus your attention on this home invader. And that's pretty much all. So the main takeaways we can take from this are you need to look for a few different things when you're picking your shots. It's not just throw your camera up, hit record, and do your thing, right? Stick your camera up, look around, see what looks good, see if there's leading lines, see if there's foreground, background, and see what the best shot is. I promise you those extra 10 minutes, those extra 15 minutes you take looking for the shot and looking for proper framing and foreground is gonna make your production that much better, and it's not something that's super hard to do. Like, it's super easy, you just need to take the time and do it and practice it as much as you can so you can be quicker on finding those types of things, and you don't even have to think about it. You just know what looks good and know what doesn't. So obviously those are my takeaways. If you're looking to add depth to your images, number one, look for foreground. That's probably my number one recommendation, is foreground. Foreground makes everything look that much better. Number two, background. Add some background, add some movement in the back. Have something going on so your subject can pop from the background. And sometimes it's nice to have a still background too, right? It all depends on the situation. Number three is leading lines. Don't neglect lines. Lines can really pull the attention to the subject depending on where those lines are pointing. This one's super easy to look for too. A line might be coming here, and if you raise your camera up a little bit, then it's pointing at his head. So it all depends. Take that extra 2 seconds and figure out the framing and how you can make your subject pop that much more. And number 4, the last one, is a frame within a frame. If you have the opportunity to single out your subject by framing him within a doorway or a window or between 2 picture frames like that one I did, or maybe it's between 2 beams in the construction of the house like that last clip I showed you guys. So I just take those things into account. Make sure you got foreground, background, leading lines, and framing. So that was a breakdown of how you guys can get some more depth in your videos and in your images to make them a little bit more dynamic and make them stand out a little bit more for your clients, for yourself, for your customers, whoever you're making the video for. Those are some tips, and those are some things I look for when filming on how to pull my audience into my image and kind of draw their eyes where I want it to go. So thank you guys for watching this video. I appreciate it. Let me know if there's any other videos or topics you guys want me to cover, that you guys want to learn, that you guys want to know. If you like this video, please hit like. It only takes 2 seconds. If you want to see more videos like these, or maybe you just like looking at my face, hit the subscribe button. I'd love to have you guys here. I'd love to have you watch these videos, have you learn from the things that I know, and maybe drop a comment down below. Tell me your favorite part about this episode, or one thing you learned in this episode, or something you want me to touch on in the next video. We will see you when we see you. I don't even know. Peace out.
Enchanté.